Hello?
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention?
Welcome aboard Frank's Magic Bus. For the next 2 hours, Frank Welch takes you on a musical journey with some of the best deep tracks in classic rock history. You'll hear this week's featured artist and a whole lot more.
Woohoo! No, Kelly Clarkson!
Now, without further ado, Frank Welch.
Right now, let's take a few minutes to stop down to talk to the lead singer of one of the coolest early 1980s bands, the Fixx, with 2 X's at a time in the very early 80s, like I was mentioning. And then rock wasn't doing really good at that time, but this is one of the cool bands. British band. Stand or Fall, Saved by Zero, Red Skies, One Thing Leads to Another. Very cool stuff there from that period. Were they new wave? Were they pop? Were they album rock? So they get back together for a 2012 release, a new album. Let's talk to Cy Curnin, lead singer of the Fixx, about some of the more recent stuff and some of the classic stuff. I did get the new song, Anyone Else, and I've listened to this now a couple of times, and I really like it. It sounds contemporary, but it kind of has that 80s sound and feel that you guys in the Fixx were so famous for. Did you purposely try to kind of go back to that vintage 80s sound, or is it just how the instruments ended up sounding?
Yeah, I think it's just it's the way we are. You know, we have the same style in our walk, but the direction that we're walking in is different. It comes out naturally, and inspiration for that is back in the early 80s. Political turmoil, social turmoil. Today, political turmoil, social turmoil.
Not much has changed there, huh?
Not much has changed. So, you know, it's good for us to fly the flag, and we can see the lighthouse of the past and where we're at in the present.
Now, talk about this new album as far as the lineup. Is this pretty much the original lineup of the Fixx that you guys had originally in the 80s?
Yeah, all original guys. Dan K. Brown, the bass player, joined us again just after 2003. He had a little hiccup health-wise early 90s, decided to just rest up. Now he's back. He is one of the vital ingredients to this band.
Well, the instrumentation sounds really good in this song.
So everyone does what they want, but everyone knows what the sound is, so we always end up on the righteous path.
The sound now compared to the sound back in the 80s. Now, I remember when in the early 80s when the Fixx came out with that string of hits, 82, 83, Red Skies, which is my favorite Fixx song of all time.
Right.
One Thing Leads to Another. I remember thinking at the time, this sounds different. Sonically, it sounded different, and it kind of separated itself from the other things at that time in the early 80s, and it was a lot of new wave and punk and leftover punk from the 70s and everything. I remember hearing the Fixx songs on both album rock radio stations here in the USA and Top 40 Pop. Did you realize at the time how kind of permanent and long-lasting the sound would be?
No, we had no idea how long it would be, but I did remember thinking it was kind of cool to be on several formats. It was almost as like we'd won a personal battle, because I always thought that music was universal. And when you try and put it in a box, if it's good, it's going to break out of that box and break the mold. And I think in the early days when we first started, it was very much rock radio with Stand or Fall and Red Skies. And then along came MTV, and we had One Thing Leads to Another and Saved by Zero that kind of showed a little more of the pop sensitivity. The record company was definitely trying to push us more that way. And then from there, when our careers kind of went on down the road, we had both sides. We had this rock route, which is great for live, but we had this pop sensibility, which is great for audience.
As we continue our one-on-one conversation with Cy Curnin, the lead singer of the Fixx, I talked to him about when they first burst on the scene in the early 1980s. We did hear them all over American radio, but not just on certain kinds of stations. Well, you know, at that time, not every group was able to make that bridge, because I was traveling at the time a lot here in the USA, and I would hear, like Stand or Fall, another great Fixx song, on an album rock station. But then the next day in another town, I'd hear it in a top 40 station. But not a lot of groups in that time were making that bridge, you know?
Yeah, but I remember I think it was Justin Hayward from the Moody Blues who said to me, you should never be too in, so you could never be too out. And I think in terms of Fixx music, we never really aligned ourselves to a particular movement, even though we did come over at a time it was called New Wave or the British Invasion. But timing-wise, that was when we appeared, but we never had an allegiance to one particular movement. We had a great guitarist. We have a really interesting keyboard player. We kind of had a broad brush, and I think in terms of lyrically, my dad used to say to me, never, there's a phrase in the marketing world which is never overestimate the intelligence of the general public. my dad used to say to me, never underestimate the intelligence of the general public. And I think in terms of what our body of work is, I always was singing for the common man, the little guy who didn't have a voice, but it's his weight and his power that really steers the ship.
That's pretty interesting. Talk about how this new music here in this new album is reflective in what's going on in the world right now. Isn't it kind of running through your whole new album?
Yeah, it's running through that. I mean, we're looking at, could say from the early 80s to now, there's the generation, if we're going to give it a tag, was pretty much the spoiled brat generation. And then now that things are getting very hard, because we wanted to just hope that our bankers were moral people and our lawyers were ethically correct and everything was just going to be tickety-boo. But then, of course, it isn't. Human nature prevailed. Absolute power corrupts. Nothing more than absolute power. Now we're waking up in a world where personal responsibility and accountability are the buzzwords, and there's no escaping the fact that we're all in this together. So if we want to blame, we have to take our own weight in our hand. That's the world we're living in, and that's perfect inspiration for Fixx album. I think the future could be good. I didn't have children to tell them their world is screwed. I had children to show them by example that it's an effort, but if you make an effort become its own reward, the sun will shine.
And we're kind of going through that in the USA right now.
Not only in the USA, it's way back in, we're going through that in Europe, around the whole world that is going on. If you look at the Occupy movement, we all have a little bit of the leader in us. There was no leader, but we are all the leader. It's the wish that we want to see that's coming out now.
Yeah, the spoiled brat generation of the 80s. Is that what you called it?
Yeah.
I've never heard that. That's actually a pretty good description.
Yeah.
But actually, you could almost say that in recent years also. But I always looked at the sound of the Fixx tunes, the vintage classic stuff, like I said, Red Skies and Stand or Fall and stuff like that. I remember at the time, and I still use this word to describe it when I play it on my radio show, ethereal. It just had a sonic sound to it that it was almost half spooky and ethereal.
That is Jamie West Orham's guitar sound. Huge evocative sounds. Very inspiring to me as a singer and as a writer. It's like a big night sky. Then he inspires everyone else in the band to create their own version of that and how it's going to fit in. And before you know it, it's almost like a Star Wars bar.
That is funny. What are fans' favorite Fixx song of all time?
Well, funny enough, until we see what they like about the new album, there was this song called Lighthouse that the fans named the forum, the Fixx forum, where they discussed their fanaticism for the band. And they named it Lighthouse. And Lighthouse is the track that we played for a couple of years and never, ever recorded it. And it's almost become the holy grail. They want us to record it, but we only play it live occasionally. And I kind of think it's cool because when you're out at sea and you're sort of in the dark and you see this little lighthouse shining, it's kind of reflection.
But you have never commercially recorded the song?
No, we haven't. There are a couple of bootlegs of Milwaukee Summerfest on the edge of the lake where we played it. And that day there'd been in the fuel stop, a guy had dropped down dead before us, and I was just sending a sort of farewell to him on stage right before we played the song, and a triple rainbow came out above the stage. It was like
wow.
Fixx legend, that is.
You think some live concert bootleg version would be on YouTube of that Lifehouse?
It may be, actually. I haven't looked, but you can check it out. Hi there, this is Cy Curnin from the Fixx, and you're rocking with Frank Welch.